Grazie per essere qui. Thank you for coming for the second leg of this Indo Pacific project. I thank you more than I would do normally because it is not easy to have events on 2 days. Most of you are professionals, so you know these things. And so we, on the Saudatian side, we are happy to see how many people are coming to the event, which is in fact the second part of an event where yesterday we had more than 100 attendees in the room. So thank you for coming, really. And and it's a hot day in Rome, so thank you more. It shows that the issue of the Indo-Pacific, such a large issue, by the way, we try to address a few things, but of course is much larger than what we should do, is an important one, and we try to cover as much space as possible, trying in a few hours to put together the best speakers we can find, and yesterday it was a very good example of that, and today I'm sure it will be the same, and to address some issues which we think are important, not in a confrontational ways. We don't want to speak about wars, about enemies, about that. We want to speak about how we can build perhaps a better society, a better understanding, how different continents are linked together and all that. So anyway, welcome again, and I think we can start the day with Madame Gretsch, who is the representative of the European Commission in Rome, and I'm sure that she will have an interesting beginning of this morning. You're very welcome. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, distinguished guests, colleagues. I'm really pleased to be here today, and I'm very grateful for the invitation to address you on this very topical subject. I have to excuse myself in advance that after my intervention, I'm going to have to do a runner and leave immediately, so I hope you don't have any questions for me, because then you might have to address them to somebody else. But I really wanted to be with you this morning. The global order, as we all know, is undergoing a profound rebalancing. As we meet in 2025, the Indo Pacific hosts 7 of the world's 10 largest armies, and 4 of these states are nuclear powers. The region also encompasses some of the most vital maritime lines on the planet: the Straits of Malacca, the South China Sea, and Bab el-Mandeb. These sea lanes carry over 60% of global maritime trade, connecting Arab production hubs with European markets and beyond. For the European Union, and as the ambassador already said, I'm here to represent the European Commission, 24 member states of the European Union are NATO members, leaving only 3 out. And therefore the region is very important because the Indo-Pacific is not just a distant place, but a region of immediate and growing strategic relevance. Europe's prosperity is inseparably tied to its stability. The world's prosperity is tied to its stability. The EU is the region's top foreign investor and major trade partner. European exports and imports flow through Indo-Pacific waters, and the EU's key interests, from open markets to climate resilience and maritime security, are increasingly shaped by dynamics unfolding to the east. Indo-Pacific nations alone accounted for roughly 130 to 137 billion euros in trade with the EU in the fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Yet this opportunity-rich region is also marked by intensifying strategic competition, especially between the US and China, escalating military buildups and risks to the rules-based international order. Europe must therefore assert a balanced, principled presence, promoting multilateralism and safeguarding maritime freedoms without being drawn into great power confrontation. At the same time, climate change, supply chain fragility, and governance challenges threaten both local and global stability. For Europe, the Indo-Pacific presents a critical test. To remain a credible geopolitical actor, the EU must be present, principled, and proactive. In this regard, in September 2021, the EU unveiled its strategy for cooperation in the Indo Pacific. Far from being a mere declaration of intent, the strategy reflects the Union's wish and ambition to deepen engagement across 7 key domains, including sustainable prosperity, green transition, ocean governance, digital partnerships, infrastructure and connectivity, security and defense, and human security. The EU's approach is guided by 3 core principles: inclusivity, meaning cooperation with all the regional partners; openness, ensuring that partnerships are not exclusive or coercive; and a long-term perspective, recognizing that regional integration and stability are generational undertakings. Crucially, the EU's Indo-Pacific engagement is a pivot for Europe's own strategic autonomy, resilience, and global credibility. The strategy is being operationalized through bilateral and multilateral partnerships, concrete projects under the Global Gateway Initiative, and a growing presence in diplomatic, commercial, and security fora throughout the region. At diplomatic level, the EU has significantly elevated its Indo-Pacific presence. Since the 2022 EU-ASEAN Commemorative Summit, Brussels has hosted successive Indo-Pacific ministerial fora, with the most recent in February 24, bringing together over 60 delegations from Asia and Europe. The turning point, however, came in February 25, with President Ursula von der Leyen's landmark visit to India, accompanied by the full College of the European Commissioners, 27 of them in total. This was the first time under the new Commission mandate that the entire team traveled together to a non-European power. And India was not chosen just by chance. This historic mission underlined the centrality of India in Europe's Indo-Pacific vision. During the visit, the EU and India reaffirmed their commitment to conclude a comprehensive free trade agreement by the end of 2025. The message was unambiguous. Europe does not simply seek trade flows, but trusted, values-based partnerships with Indo-Pacific democracies. The region is at the front line of climate disruption. Climate change is a daily reality. It accounts for more than 60% of global carbon emissions, making its cooperation essential to global mitigation efforts. In order to tackle these challenges, the EU has stepped up accordingly, and since 2022, it has provided over 3.5 billion euros in climate finance to Indo-Pacific partners. In 2024, the EU and Pacific Island countries launched the EU-Pacific Resilience Facility, focused on disaster preparedness, climate adaptation, and environmental monitoring. Equally, the EU's Blue Economy Partnership promotes ocean governance, marine biodiversity protection, and efforts to combat illegal fishing, an existential threat for many coastal communities. These actions reflect a European commitment to climate justice and sustainable development, anchored in shared global responsibility. Trade is the backbone of EU Indo-Pacific relations, especially in the current geopolitical situation we're living in. The EU is already the region's second largest trading partner. Comprehensive trade agreements are in force with Japan, Singapore, South Korea, and Vietnam. Talks have resumed with India, Indonesia, and Thailand, and in 2023, the EU concluded a free trade agreement with New Zealand. Yet beyond trade liberalization, the EU is investing in resilient connectivity. Through the Global Gateway, more than 12 billion is being deployed in strategic transport, digital, and energy infrastructure, from high-speed rail in Indonesia to fiber optic cables linking the Indian Ocean to East Africa. Europe is also taking steps to secure its own economic future. Partnerships with Australia on critical raw materials and with Japan and South Korea on semiconductors and digital standards aim to reduce strategic dependencies and bolster Europe's technological sovereignty. European participation in regional security has evolved significantly. The 2022 Strategic Compass expressly tasks the EU with promoting maritime security in the Indo-Pacific, underscoring a shift from distant observer to active enabler. Since then, EU member states, including France, Germany, and Italy, have deployed naval vessels for joint exercises and freedom of navigation operations. The Coordinated Maritime Presence Initiative, operational in the Northwest Indian Ocean since 2022, enhances maritime domain awareness. Bilateral and multilateral naval exercises are growing. Europe is training alongside Indian, Japanese, and Southeast Asian naval forces. Security cooperation also spans training, maritime patrol, cybersecurity, counterterrorism with partners such as the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. A dedicated Cyber-ASEAN dialogue launched in 2024 addresses emerging hybrid threats, underscoring Europe's holistic view of security. This layered approach, from presence to partnership, reinforces European credibility as a security actor, whilst remaining anchored in multilateralism. By way of conclusion, in 2025, we stand at a strategic inflection point. Europe's presence in the Indo Pacific has moved from policy statements to purposeful action, a multidimensional engagement that aligns trade, climate, security, and diplomacy under coherent strategy. Whether through flagship infrastructure, shared climate action, trade deals, defense dialogues, or democratic support, the EU is translating its Indo-Pacific strategy into concrete, visible impact. It does not do so to confront, but to cooperate and empower. As President von der Leyen stated in New Delhi earlier this year, this is a moment for pragmatism and ambition, and for reimagining Europe's role in a region that will determine our collective future. The EU's Indo-Pacific engagement is ultimately about ensuring that Europe remains not just relevant, but reliable, as a partner for peace, prosperity, and principled leadership in an increasingly contested world. Thank you.
Buongiorno, sono Siddhartha Chakrabarti, il vice ambasciatore di Australia in Italia. I'm Siddhartha Chakrabarti, I'm the deputy head of mission here in Italy for Australia. Ellen has done most of the work and now left, so I can say whatever I like about Europe now, but suffice to say, being from the Indo-Pacific, I could talk about this topic forever. I'm not going to focus on trade, even though, as Elena said, for us, in Australia, we basically have the entire periodic table of elements of critical minerals, and there is a lot of potential and real cooperation between Europe and Australia there. I'm going to instead focus on the security aspects. And indeed, it is a privilege to speak with you today about the Indo-Pacific, a region whose stability and prosperity are increasingly vital to Europe's own strategic future. It's not a distant theatre. It is a dynamic, interconnected region that drives global growth, innovation, and security. It is also a region under pressure from coercive state behaviour, contested maritime claims, and the erosion of international norms. Australia's message is simple. We cannot take peace for granted, and we cannot preserve it through military strength alone. We must invest in dialogue, diplomacy, and the rules-based order that has underpinned global security for decades. This order, though imperfect, has enabled smaller states to thrive, constrained the arbitrary use of force, and fostered the greatest period of shared prosperity in human history. It is also not a Western construct. It's a global achievement shaped by voices from Europe, Asia, and the global South. Yet today, that order is under strain. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a stark reminder of what happens when power is placed above principle. And its implications are not confined to Europe. The strategic alignment we see amongst a number of states are reshaping the global security landscape. Australia is responding with resolve, For example, we are doubling our defence investment to $100 billion annually by the mid-2030s. But we are equally committed to diplomacy, because deterrence without dialogue risks miscalculation, and miscalculation is the greatest threat we face. Recent efforts across the Indo Pacific show that dialogue is not only possible, it is essential. ASEAN continues to serve as a vital platform for regional diplomacy, and we were honoured to mark 50 years as ASEAN's first dialogue partner this year. India's Raisina dialogue and Japan's leadership in regional security forums have brought together diverse voices to reinforce shared norms, and the EU's own Indo-Pacific strategy has been a strong signal of Europe's growing engagement in the region. We welcome the strategy because the Indo-Pacific needs Europe, not just as a trading partner, but as a voice for peace, sovereignty, and international law. We are already working closely together. As Elena said, there's the presence of European navies in the Pacific, joint exercises, and defence industrial cooperation. And these are all signs of a growing trans-regional commitment to stability. And you may have seen, or you may not, because it was sort of overnight, that at the G7 in Canada, Prime Minister Albanese and Presidents von der Leyen and Costa agreed to start negotiations on a security and defence partnership between Australia and the EU. Like similar partnerships, our partnership will provide a framework for cooperation, including on defence industry, cyber and counter-terrorism. It will strengthen cooperation on global security challenges at a time of global uncertainty. We are also deepening our partnerships across the region, from the United States and Japan to India, Indonesia and the Philippines. As Prime Minister Albanese said yesterday, it is our collective responsibility to work together to uphold peace, security and economic prosperity. We seek a region where sovereignty is respected and where disputes can be resolved through dialogue. We believe Europe and the Indo-Pacific are bound by shared values and shared interests. As President von der Leyen said yesterday, we are also bound by shared security interests. We believe that working together, through diplomacy, deterrence, and principled engagement, we can prevent conflict and build a future defined not by division, but by cooperation. Thank you.
Ambassador Minuto Rizzo, members of the Diplomatic Corps, esteemed colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to this final substantive panel of this conference and a discussion on emerging and mutating challenges in the Indo-Pacific. My name is Gorana Grgic. I'm a senior researcher in transatlantic security and the head of the Swiss and Euro-Atlantic security team at the Center for Security Studies of the ETH Zurich. And it's a real pleasure to chair today's panel, which brings together quite distinct institutional as well as national perspectives in what we are trying to do as we shape the collective security landscape. As Ambassador Minuto Rizzo already mentioned, yesterday we had quite a productive set of sessions and conversations, and I think that you will all agree that a lot of them highlighted not just the challenges and the diagnosis of what is on the agenda when it comes to security of the Indo-Pacific, but also what touches the Euro-Atlantic space, but also in proposing quite a distinct set of innovative solutions for how we can actually cooperate and see this future that is more positive and optimistic, as one of the panelists suggested at the very end of yesterday's discussions. So I hope we continue in this manner of being productive and offering quite a few food for thought, and we will actually delve deeper into the complex security iceberg, I would say, and look at some of the challenges we didn't quite mention yesterday. And as we dig a bit deeper than just the headlines, the list is quite long, from sabotage to organized crime to climate change to various issues that, again, are transnational and that really resist sort of simple solutions, especially as we find ourselves in an era of strategic competition, which again coexist as a paradigm along with the various challenges that I mentioned and that have indeed been outlined and mentioned by very few policy pronouncements as well as strategies coming out of some of the institutions that we have represented here. So, without further ado, we are very fortunate to be joined by speakers who bring distinct institutional as well as national perspectives to these points, and I look forward to hearing their insights in how we go from diagnosis into real action. And I'm going to turn on that note to the panel and start with ladies first and refer to a conversation we had on representation on the panel, because I think it's quite rare that we have two cities of Switzerland that deal with security represented. So to my immediate right is Christina Shuri-Lang, who is the head of Geneva's Centers for Security Policy, Counterterrorism and Preventing Violent Extremism team, so an old friend and colleague back from Switzerland. Over to her right is Mr. Ivo Schute, pardon my Dutch, but he is the head of division for Indo Pacific at the European External Action Service in Brussels. So I think we couldn't have gotten a better person to talk to us about all things Indo-Pacific and EU. And over to his right is Pietro De Matteis, who you would have heard from yesterday already. And it's great that we have Pietro as well as the program officer for the Indo-Pacific at the NATO HQ, who is basically living and breathing all things Indo-Pacific for and beyond. So on that note, all of the panelists have been instructed to deliver about 9 minutes remarks. We will start in the printed order, so with Ivo first going to Christina and then to Pietro, and then as we did in the previous sessions, we really hope to make this as interactive as possible, so please note all of your questions as we go, and I hope we can address all of them and still keep to the schedule to wrap up around 1:15 noon. So without further ado, Ivo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. First, I wanted to thank very much the Nato Defense College Foundation for organizing this interesting event, firstly, but also for inviting the European institutions today, for inviting the ES and the European Commission. Indeed, because yesterday, and thanks again for the very interesting exchanges yesterday, and at several occasions, I really thought that there was really a need to add to what was said the European perspective. So today we have the chance to do that. Maybe just to recall some of the points that came up yesterday, where I really thought, oh, this is where we are already working. Some examples. One of the speakers referred to the need to work with partners in the Indo-Pacific on space. Well, in fact, you may have seen that last week, High Representative Callas, when having the dialogue with Foreign Minister of India, Jaishankar, they agreed to launch a formal space dialogue with India. So this is something that we're concretely working on. There was also yesterday one of the speakers pointed to the fact that we need to concentrate much more on working with the Indian Ocean. Well, the EU has just last month participated for the first time as dialogue partner in a ministerial of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA. So just some points where I thought I wanted to make the point. So good that we now have the occasion to go a little bit deeper into what we're doing on as the EU. I think also one of the speakers yesterday mentioned that Europe is making up for lost time in the Indo-Pacific. Well, I take that very much as an encouragement. Elena, she set the stage. She said she laid the basis for some of the developments on the EU side on the Indo-Pacific. I will try to go a little bit into some of those particular issues, and I wanted to thank you for putting me on this particular panel, because I think this is indeed so the area that we try to cover here this morning is where we are strongest. We're not focusing only as the EU on hard security, but we have a holistic approach, as Elena mentioned, also to the region that underpins our strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. The aim of our strategy is, of course, to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, to reinforce a rules-based international order, and to address global challenges. And indeed, it's a very multi-dimensional strategy. Elena mentioned already 7 priority areas that we have in that strategy. Going back to 2021, when we prepared that strategy, I think at the time, the EU's main image, at least in the region, was really that of a key trading partner, for some a key provider of development aid, and in certain cases of humanitarian assistance. But, and this was also mentioned this morning, from the outset for the EU, it was very clear that there is a strong link between the prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region and of Europe, and that this linkage, this trade linkage, brings strong vulnerabilities, and therefore the need to jointly work on preserving stability and security. To this was added another dimension now with current interlinkages between security theaters in Europe and in the Indo-Pacific. So Russia's engagement with China, with the DPRK, is a destabilizing factor on both sides. So therefore, I think 4 years into the implementation of the Indo-Pacific strategy, the focus, but also the perception of the EU has changed. The EU itself has shifted gear, of course. We're faced with developments in our neighborhood and beyond. And so, as HRVP Callas put it at the Shangri-La dialogue last month, the EU has reimagined its paradigm as a peace project backed up with hard defense. And the EU is becoming a global security partner, notably in the Indo-Pacific. I will say a little bit more on security and defense priority of our strategy. First, back to the overall approach. For us, everything starts with partnerships, both bilateral between the EU and individual Indo-Pacific partners, but also very importantly by supporting regional groupings and initiatives, which is of course our DNA as the EU. I mean, there was a lot of talk again about these different groupings yesterday already. The EU has signed up to IMEC. We really want to make it happen once the conditions are right in terms of regional stability. I mentioned already IORA before, and obviously we are a strategic partner of ASEAN. We're also joining the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Then maybe back also to this holistic approach and to the different priority areas, as underlined yesterday as well, there can be no stability if we do not focus on the green transition. We support partners in the Indo-Pacific to develop in a sustainable way, helping them to fight climate change. We have just energy transition partnerships with Indonesia, with Vietnam. We have the EU-Japan Green Alliance. We have the Green-Blue Alliance for the Pacific, etc. Digital, we're focusing a lot of attention on digital. We have concluded digital partnerships with Japan, with Korea, with Singapore, we're negotiating digital trade agreements with both Singapore and Korea. And we're also working more and more on with partners on foreign information manipulation and interference. Holistic for us also means that the approach to the Indo-Pacific is to the entire route linking us and the region. So the Western Indian Ocean is a gateway into the Indo-Pacific, of course, and stability and freedom of navigation are vital. And we're supporting our partners in the Western Indian Ocean in dealing with maritime security, maritime pollution, illegal and unregulated fishing activities. Now, coming back to what I said before, how the EU is more and more contributing to regional security. So obviously the current complex, volatile environment, in this environment, the defense and security dimension of our engagement has gained importance. So last November, we adopted security and defense partnerships with Japan and with Korea. Those were the first partnerships outside Europe. And it was just mentioned, as we speak, more or less, there is the intention now or the commitment to a security and defense partnership with Australia. And last week, also again at this strategic dialogue between the EU and India, there was also the agreement that there's a very strong case for having the same with India. We also continue to enhance regional security in the Indo Pacific, engaging in more operational cooperation. It was mentioned joint naval exercises with Indo Pacific partners. Naval Operation Atalanta has conducted successful exercises with Djibouti, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea. We have our EU-funded program on enhancing security cooperation in and with Asia, which led to very practical cooperation in key, let's say, non-traditional areas like counterterrorism, cybersecurity, maritime security, crisis management. A big focus of what we do is also on maritime security awareness, where we launched operational cooperation on building maritime domain awareness with partners in partner countries in the region, involving a total of 50 countries. And we're also working on interoperability of maritime systems with partners. I see that I'm running out of time. Just pointing out one of the issues, I think, which shows how how the role of the EU as also as a convening partner with the region has been demonstrated is the fora that Elena also mentioned. We are now, and I know very well because it's my team who has to prepare this. We are prepared. We started the preparations for the next ministerial forum. So we had already 3 Indo-Pacific ministerial forums with 70 participants at ministerial level from both Europe and the region. Next session is coming up now in November. Voila. So I'll leave it here.
Thank you very much for that, Ivo. Thanks for not making me have to do the chair's sort of enforcement of time, so very much on time. Over to Christina.
Thank you so much, and I hope the sound is okay. I wanted to thank President Nato Rizzo and Director Politi and the NATO Foundation for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm also just have a bunch of slides, so I hope to stay on time. I'm going to talk about continuity and mutation in the terrorist criminal threat, and I'm hopefully going to give some ideas also on issues on collaboration. So, the slides, please. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what are the factors that are creating a growing nexus of terrorism and illicit trade and piracy, and then finally, how can we improve our responses to address these issues more sustainably and into the future. I always ask my students at Sciences Po, what are the key factors really that are responsible for maritime terrorism, the nexus of piracy and sea robbery? And I think all of you, after this wonderful day that we had yesterday, are aware of what these issues are. But I would argue that these are some of the major issues. It's the resurgent geopolitical competition. It's the persistent weakness of states, weaker now because of COVID-19, weaker now because of internal conflicts and wars, weaker now due to the growing global trade wars. And also, of course, climate change is a huge enabler to terrorists and criminals, and technology and crypto. So these are all the things I hope to cover today. This is really, truly the biggest game in town, the geopolitical struggle. And I think many of you have witnessed that, and you see that in the media. It is really who will win the technology and the quantum, who will win the key to the castle, so to speak. So why I'm going to talk a little bit about maritime security is because really 80% of this region is blue, and a really big part of it is very the world's most populous, richest, and most developed area in the world in the next 20 years. That's what people predict. And as we heard from the statistics, everything is really happening in this corner of the world. When you talk about maritime security, you really have to look at the whole marine environment, the economic development, the national security, and the human security perspective, because it really is these four issues combined. Maritime security is really relevant, and of course we're going to focus mostly on the national security, but I never want to forget human security, because this is what is leading to terrorism and organized crime in the region. How do we prepare for these maritime terrorism scenarios? We see they're attacking ships, they're hijacking ships, there are attacks on critical maritime infrastructure. What we really have to worry about in the future is the unmanned underwater vehicles that could be a big risk, and we need more and more defense and intelligence on this. COVID has become a big disruptor to maritime security, and we've seen that in many different ways because of the inability to reduce the patrols and enforcement. But also poverty and unemployment has skyrocketed, and this hardship tool has really created economic distress in countries like Indonesia, Bangladesh, and India, and also the misinformation and conspiracy theories that have happened because of the COVID, and this was addressed yesterday. Climate change has become a huge enabler, and we see that with the rising sea levels, typhoons, droughts. This is all pushing people into poverty and is giving pressure to governments as well. And these exclusive economic zones are becoming more and more difficult to govern. And of course, these places are exploited by terrorists and organized criminals. So we see more and more what we call sea jihad. I wanted to enforce that in the sense that the Abu Sayyaf group and Jamaat Islamiyah, JI, have all are abusing the sea as a way for piracy and for abusing the security in the region. There has been some counterterrorism success, especially in Malaysia and Indonesia and the Philippines, and I really wanted to highlight that. And why the success has been so great is because they really focused on multiple issues. They focused on human security issues, dealing with local grievances of the people in the region, and really working towards even overcrowded prisons, giving people a way out from the criminal and the terrorist scene, and giving them their lives back. So Malaysia has been super effective in professional intelligence and CT units. They have strong counterterrorism laws, but they have really good de-radicalization programs, and this has been really, really effective. Crime terror nexus is growing in the Indo Pacific. Again, terrorists are engaging online. Criminal gangs are supporting terror networks, and terrorists are engaging in different criminal things. And we can highlight that later. But drug trafficking's routes are also being run through war zones, and this is really, really an important point because we see more and more instability, especially in Myanmar's in the Golden Triangle. Especially Myanmar has become sort of the hotbed of meth trafficking, and here you see again the human security factors. Another huge issue is precursor chemical flows that are coming from China, but also from different parts of India. And these are feeding as synthetic drugs, which are growing dramatically. We also see maritime trafficking of finished drugs, which have become really, really important and worrisome. Meth especially has grown, and there's ties to the climate change, and I will highlight that if you want in the questions. So we need more maritime domain awareness. We need more satellites, drones to look at the illegal fishing. We need regional platforms. Technology has also created a new black market. Technology is radically transforming and accelerating how drugs are sold and distributed. Young people are buying drugs online. They can buy them through crypto. Cryptos are hidden in illicit platforms. And so technology is really, really important for traffickers, and it's helping them stay ahead of regulations and move drugs more easily. They're using everything. They're exploiting AI. They're exploiting drones. They have new smuggling methods where they're using postal deliveries that include drones. So finally, how can we improve our responses? I think this is one of the most important parts of the presentation is we need more and more support. The Information Fusion Center was mentioned yesterday in Singapore. It's very useful. Also, the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center in Madagascar, information fusion centers in the Indian Ocean region. These are really important for sharing information, but also working on different projects together within the European Union. Key Indo Pacific partners for collaboration are Australia, Japan, of course, South Korea, New Zealand, but also ASEAN nations, bringing in everyone from Interpol to the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. These are all really relevant organizations and partners. So what are some policy recommendations? I think we have to focus on RECAP, which is a really important organization, the Maritime Coordination Center. We need more training. We need more information on terrorist financing, because the richer terrorists are, the more irrelevant and important they become. We saw that with the $1 billion ISIS, what they could do. We need to curb environmental crimes, especially the fight against illegal fishing. We need to step up working on these issues, especially supporting the Pacific Islands Forum Fisheries Agency. We need more security sector reform. We need more policing, more coast guards, more maritime police, better maritime security strategies. Our sister organization, the DCAF in Geneva, is working on this. And I just also want to just throw it out there, and I think if I get one more minute, we need to have a dedicated United Nations body on maritime security. Maybe this is my Geneva perspective, but we need to have a place where people can agree to disagree, but also to come together on maritime security, because we need an overall picture, a fusion of the world on maritime security. And finally, we need really to focus on that, because the UN could build on other ideas of, for example, the counterterrorism, working like the counterterrorism forum that we have within the United Nations. This could be sort of the role model. Here are some links, and I hope you will get all my slides on counter-piracy organizations that are really valuable. And then, of course, my final thoughts is maritime security is all about safeguarding maritime activities, the environment, and security threats. It's a human security issue, it's a national security issue, it's an international security issue, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks for the tour de force overview of both of what I said. We are moving beyond just diagnosis into action. I think that if we hear about UNOMS, if I'm not mistaken, UN Office for Maritime Security, you heard it first here, right? And I hope that Christina has already put some sort of copyright on that acronym. Over to our last panelist, Pietro De Matteis, NATO perspective on all of these things.
And more.
And more, oh my God, that is really food for thought. This is a buffet, basically, of a brunch type intellectual affair.
Yes, thank you very much. So once again, very good to be here. Again, thank you very much, Ambassador Minorizzo and Director Politi. Actually, when I saw the title of this panel, I found that's exactly the title we need, because mutating emerging challenges. Actually, if you think of NATO, organization started in 1949, so many things have changed. Everything has changed, right? And actually, I was thinking, if there is one thing that can give a sense of the strength of an organization or a country or a society, is actually the ability to change, to adapt to the changes, right? So I think what we can say, and the same also for the European Union, actually I worked for the European Union for many years as well, I think both organizations, the EU and NATO, they were able to adapt to challenges and grow stronger and stronger, challenge after challenge. I think that shows the resilience of our organization, but also organizations which are strong because of the democracies which underpin our organizations. And I think that's an important element, because democracy may be slow sometimes, but they can adapt. Regimes, when they test by challenges, often they collapse, right? So just a point about the title of the panel, which I found very pertinent. Now, as you know, I mentioned NATO when it started, it was focusing on three key domains, right? Protection of the land, the sea, and the air. So that's very basic. Huh? So you think of all the emerging things that we discussed now, they were not there. Now, late 90s, we realized actually that we were relying much more on information environment, information structure, networks. And so we started including cyber. So cyber became a full domain in 2014, actually 2016, and a couple of years earlier, actually, we realized that a cyber attack could become a reason for triggering Article 5, because the security, our security, is so much reliant on a communication infrastructure that a cyber attack could actually impact not only our security as individuals, our data, as I mentioned yesterday, our hospital, our businesses, but actually imagine a denial of service on some critical infrastructure. This could cause accidents on planes, airports, and of course, if you have to deploy a military operation to defend your country at that moment, that actually can have really lethal impact. So clearly, cyber became a domain, and we operate to ensure this domain is fully integrated in the other three domains. Space, maybe back in the 50s, space was just a mirage far away, but now space is essential for communications again. Space, and more so in the coming years with the low orbit and middle orbit satellites, will become essential for communication even between citizens with the high-speed internet and so on and so forth. And the control of space, especially ensuring the space is managed in a free and transparent manner, would be an essential global good. So essentially, we also operate in this, and we realize that there is a interdependency between private sector and public sector on the management of space. In some countries, and you know whom I'm referring to, they are also trying to militarize space, with clearly also an impact on our own security. So these are some elements which currently, I think, reflect these emerging challenges. And I think what matters also for us as an organization, which is multilateral organization, which operates for peace, through deterrence, as I mentioned also in the past. I think it's very important. We are not an aggressive alliance. We are an alliance which builds capacity to defend our citizens from possible attacks. But basically, we have to adapt over all these years, and we do that in a transparent manner because we are democracies. We do that through adapting our strategic concept. Actually, you can find it even online. And basically, every 10 years or so, you'll be able to see which area we are working on more effectively. And now the last concept actually was adopted in 2022, a few months after Russian aggression of Ukraine, basically outlines which are the threats and challenges that we are working on now on a daily basis. And some reflect actually what our colleagues mentioned on the panel a few minutes ago. Clearly, Russia, we started in 1949, and Russia, Soviet Union was the main threat for the alliance. We worked so much, especially after the Soviet Union collapsing, with Russia. We integrated Russia in the security architecture of Europe. We actually had Russia-NATO Council meeting in our building with them around the table discussing topics with us. Unfortunately, Putin had some hidden plans focusing on imperial claims. And this, of course, now we don't have any more this meeting with Russia. The last was actually in 2022. So clearly, we tried, but we had to evolve and we had to stop engaging Russia. Another element which is a threat also for the alliance is terrorism, as was mentioned, terrorism, organized crime, state, non-state actors. This is specifically non-state asymmetric threat. We actually engaged and triggered Article 5 only once in the history of the alliance, and that was after 9/11. So it was linked to a terrorist attack. So clearly this is an area where we operate. But then there are all the other areas I mentioned before, which are also mentioned in the concept, and I refer specifically to the hybrid threats, which are pervasive in our societies. These are the cyberspace, differently for the other domains. We have the land, sea, air. You clearly see if there is a conflict. It's there, right? You see it. But in the cyberspace, there's always conflict. In our concept, we say that the cyberspace is always contested. And in fact, in this moment, I can bet there is a cyber attack coming from state actors, non-state actors addressing some of the countries or citizens around Europe, for instance. Cyberspace is always contested, so that's why we have to enhance our capacity to deter these attacks, call them out, and often they come from China, from Russia, from Iran, and from other proxies. So we have to be able to deter those more effectively. There is another key area of hybrid threats, which actually we address very effectively, but also in partnership with some partners in the Indo Pacific, for instance, with Japan. We had a very important meeting earlier in January on this. We realized that autocracies, they try to attack us in all possible ways. And clearly, the easier way to attack us is through our own citizens. They try to use disinformation operation, or information threats, as we call them. They use existing societies, issues that we have, existing divisions, because of course we have divisions, we have problems in our society, we're not perfect. And then they use those to further divide society, to polarize debate, and to attack us, to undermine the legitimacy of our institutions, to undermine democracy. And this, I think, it's the most difficult challenge to tackle, and that's why, as I mentioned yesterday, I think these events are so important, because you are multipliers also in your communities, and you can share awareness in your conversation with your university students, academics, and things about the challenge we face. Only by enhancing resilience, and resilience meaning understanding of the challenge that we have together, we can actually be stronger. Because today, most of the challenges we face are below threshold. It's not just an attack of a missile, even though we still have this, and we see this these days, but in our society in Europe, it's below threshold. And these are some very important challenges we face. Now, we can discuss very much more during the question and answer. Now, I just want to mention a couple of points about the partnerships, because I have only 1.5 minutes left. So these challenges are global. And you realize that the cooperation with partners across the globe are essential, because we face similar challenges with democracies across the globe. So we have a pillar of work, which is the cooperative security. And specifically with the partners in the Pacific, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, we have developed this partnership. This partnership, for your information, is structured on very key and simple programmatic document. We call them individually tailored partnership program. And this covers most of the area I mentioned here earlier today. And is a way to advance the cooperation both at political level, but also on practical cooperation. So each time we engage with a partner, we would have practical cooperation, so interoperability exercises on different topics, cyber, deployment, and so on and so forth, and then political dialogue on climate change, European security, cyber, humanitarian aid, counterterrorism. So this is a way, in a cooperative manner, because challenges are too big for a single country, and even for an alliance like ours, even though it's strongest and longest in history, apparently, the Secretary says, still, we need partnership to address these challenges in an effective manner and share the good practices. Because, again, if we share the good practices, we become more resilient together and better able to tackle these issues also with our partners across the globe. So thanks very much. I leave you 4 seconds.
Amazing. Thank you. So all of this has made my job much, much easier. But I'm also aware of time, and I mean, I do have a lot of questions, especially around the below the threshold a sort of predicament, and when is it that all of the accumulation of the below the threshold actually can trigger something which is maybe above the threshold response, right? And I think cyberspace is one of these sort of instances in terms of domains where the alliance gets challenged, but many countries get challenged, right? And when is it that they do respond ultimately, right? When is it that the 1,000 cuts ultimately provoke that sort of bleeding? There were also some things that were mentioned just in terms of NATO actually in its strategic concept highlighting that the threats are actually those two paradigms that I referred to, one of strategic competition or great power competition, choose your preferential jargon, but also transnational terrorism, right, which is the sort of old paradigm. And we thought, okay, we've graduated, now we are back to kind of great power politics. But indeed, these two coexist, and sometimes actually the old paradigm is very much instrumentalized by the great powers, revisionist powers in particular, right? We see in terms of piracy, for instance, maybe further away from some of the slides that Christina was so helpfully showing, but I think the sort of Houthi attacks are basically one sort of instance of very much the kind of great power play using, again, transnational or non-state actors, right, militant actors to further their causes. However, we have only about 20 minutes, and I do not want to abuse my chair's prerogative. I would like to invite you to ask questions. I know that we have some mics circling around, so please, if you can raise your hand so that we can see you and identify yourself as you ask a question. Or are we starting to run too close to lunchtime already and everyone's sort of focused on what nice Roman delicacies might be awaiting as we exit the hall? Wow, okay, great. Then I will ask the first question, maybe. So in terms of maybe, and Christina, I'll bring you into this conversation as well, but I can't sort of not use the opportunity where we had the two representatives of the two major institutions from Brussels about EU-NATO cooperation on some of these issues, because we know now there have been 3 joint declarations. I hear that there's been a lot of talk, I think, also in terms of preparation of these strategic sort of reflection exercises, both in terms of the strategic concept and strategic compass, both published in 22, both having the same acronym, right, making it very confusing for people who work on these things. The extent to which there is that sort of reflection also on what I would say a bit of a division of labor, because I've heard in a lot of sort of discussions that maybe we'll leave EU to do more of these crisis prevention and management type of things, but this is still one of the core tasks. Pietro, you referred to another one of them, right? NATO has 3 of the core tasks, collective defense and deterrence, but also along the way came crisis prevention and management and cooperative security in the various iterations of what NATO was dealing with as it was changing, right, as it was mutating, to kind of use this term. So maybe both of your perspectives, starting with Ivo and followed by Pietro, in terms of the extent of institutional collaboration.
Well, firstly, as Pietro mentioned, he moved from the EU to NATO, so there's a very, very direct link. I mean, we used to be colleagues, but more than that, I mean, which also show. I think one should not see it as two, completely separate. In the end, and I think it's 23, no? 23. So 23 member states are both EU members and NATO members, and of course, especially CFSP, CSDP is by unanimity. So I think it's the same, like you're not speaking about completely separate entities. You're speaking exactly the same actors who are, in different contexts, through different means and through different. I mean, each organization has, of course, its own way of working, its own the possibilities which we have. So we're very much aligned, and we're very complementary, I would say. We have extremely good, exchanges. Between from all levels down to our working level, I mean, on these issues. So yeah, I leave it to them. But Pietro, you want to?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Actually, I have to say, when I worked for the European Union, NATO was not very much in our mind as EU colleagues. But I think the world has changed so much in the past 3-4 years, especially since the war of aggression in Ukraine. And now we realize, I think both sides, both NATO and the EU, realize how much we are complementary, as actually rightly said. So I would say, concretely at working level, there is very few weeks where we don't have somebody from the ES coming to NATO headquarters to brief other committee or a working meeting with some of our teams to share good practices, to share problems, perspectives. We have several times commissioners coming, HRVP coming. So I think there is a really understanding that we need to work together, and allies themselves in a regular meeting of the Council, and at different level, the committee or the NAC, North Atlantic Council, also very regularly mention the European Union as a key platform for cooperation also among European countries. So I think the key element is indeed division of labor, and clearly there are different competencies, I think, that we can, a different strength that we have as two organizations. The EU has an extensive mandate, which is much broader than NATO's, covering industrial cooperation, for instance, and some standard setting in broader sense. You have sanctions, which are very strong tools that we don't have. So these are elements, and you have a very big diplomatic representation across the world. So clearly, this is a very strong asset that the EU has. NATO, we have a very strong and clear and tested command structure, defense plans, which are the plans which ensure that we are able to defend our territory every inch, as our SecGen says. And we can do that. We can mobilize resources at no time. We have exercises to ensure we can do that across domains. So there's clear here a competence that NATO has developed over 76 years. And there is no, I believe, no ambition or no thinking that any single European country or the EU as a whole would replace that. On the contrary, and I'm a firm believer in this, I think that the European Union and European Union countries are becoming a stronger pillar in NATO, also because now, as I mentioned yesterday, there will be much more investment coming from the European side of NATO. So this will mean that NATO will also become more European in some respect, in terms of funding, in terms of leveraging. So I think this is good. This is good. And I think it's a positive evolution that will make NATO stronger.
Great. Checking again the pulse around the room. Great. We have 3 questions now. So the question that I wanted to ask Christina will have to wait because it had to do with multilateralism and its future. But maybe starting from Alexandra. Oh, sorry. We have a microphone over in the back. So, yeah, Madame, if you can identify yourself and then going to, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. First of all, thank you all for this conference. And I should like to ask, one panelist referred to interministerial, beg your pardon, forums. And I should like to know how they really work and which sort of decisional power they have got. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being very to the point and not making questions, comments, which is very appreciated. We are going to collect maybe 2 more. So Alexandra had her hand up in the first row, and then we can go over there. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your interesting point of view. I'm Matteo Baldassari. I would like to ask what lessons, in your opinion, can be drawn from the Indo Pacific context in the protection of strategic choke points from terrorist and hybrid challenges to be applied in other contexts, such as the Red Sea, as also the chair was highlighting before, and what role could play NATO and the European Union in this field? Thank you.
Amazing. And we are going to collect the last one, so over to the second row, and then we'll let...
Yeah, thank you very much for 3 very stimulating inputs. I have a question for Pedro. You talked about NATO's engagement with the IP4, which is of course very important, but I would like to ask about NATO's perspective on cooperation with Southeast Asia, given that Southeast Asia is kind of one of the key battlegrounds of strategic competition between the US and China, and those countries in Southeast Asia, of course, rules-based order is very important to them, so we have a common interest with them. And I'm interested in hearing a bit more of how NATO conceives of cooperation, given that China does try to influence the rhetoric of NATO expansion being targeted at China and being confrontational. How does NATO deal with that? And perhaps also in that context, I'd be interested in the EU side, how the EU seeks to support ASEAN unity, given that recent years have shown that, with Myanmar, it's quite difficult to get the cohesion in the grouping. Thanks.
Great. And I suggest maybe if we can respond in the order of presentation. So with Ivo first, Christina, and then Pietro. I think one was very specific on interministerials and what sort of enforcement or decision-making power they have. And then the Myanmar question, then choke points for Christina, and finally NATO question to Pietro.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the question on our Indo Pacific ministerial fora. So, as I said, it's the main aim of these fora is it shows the convening power of Europe towards the region, and it's like it's the first time when the first one was in I think 2022 in Paris, the first forum. It was the first time ever that you had at such a level, at such a ministerial level, the two regions talking together. It showed that the EU, and in a very delicate moment, because this all coincides, of course, with the moment of having the world thinking that Europe is looking more inwards or looking more at its direct neighborhood. But no, the EU is let's say is very much looking outside, is seeing the Indo-Pacific as a partner. So having 70 participants at ministerial level coming together, discussing. Mainly there's three broad topics that are being discussed. Economic security, so everything also in terms of trade relations. There's the green transition, which is very important, which is being discussed, and then there's the actual security and defense, which, as I explained in my intervention, is becoming more and more important. So normally how they work, these fora, practically is that there's in fact let's say three parallel sessions where the ministers really sit in smaller groupings around the table to focus on these key areas. There's no I think it would be too ambitious for the time being to think that we would have any very strong declaration coming out of it together at 70. That's not also the aim. The aim is rather to bring us together. So that's on the Indo-Pacific ministerial fora. I think there was the question on the Red Sea. Of course, we have, as you may have seen, that the EU has launched this naval operation Aspides, no, in the Red Sea, where we have quite successfully this. Well, of course, with the member states being able to help increase somehow the security in that region. I must say that it was also. I remember it vividly because it's appreciated by the partners in the region. As I mentioned, that we participated as EU for the first time in this Indian Ocean Rim Association, the ministerial last month, where Yemen very explicitly thanked the EU therefore for this for Aspides. So that struck us at that time. ASEAN unity, yes, ASEAN unity. I mean, we are. Through all kinds of ways, we are. It's still. I mean, strangely enough, with the time, our relations with ASEAN have become deeper and more important. So, being a strategic partner, we're now even looking at the next stage, which is, I think, comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN. But there are limits on what can be, on what issues we can have very concrete steps forward for the time being. And there is a real issue with unity. I think I leave it at that for the moment.
Christina.
Great. So thank you so much for that very important question. So when you counter terrorism, you really need two approaches. You need a hard security approach, and you need a smart, I call it smart, not soft, smart security approach. And I think the success in the Philippines and Malaysia has mostly been because they took a two-pronged approach. They used hard security in a sense to take down the leaders of like the Abu Sayyaf group and IJ, but they also, at the same time, worked bottom-up, whole of society, whole of government approach, dealing with the people who are getting radicalized, the young people who sometimes got radicalized just out of human security issues in the sense that they had no access to jobs or food or even sometimes water. Water is used as a weapon. And so what they did is they did reform in prisons, they offered them jobs, they offered them a way out from the terrorist groups. And this really helped, so a whole of society approach. So the idea for fighting this kind of work and how NATO and the EU can help is, well, NATO can help with the intelligence. They can help, especially if the terrorists are using drones or they know where they're working, and they can have more oversight of the sea. But the EU, I hate to say this, but they can help with the money. They can help fund for all these important projects, especially for countries like Malaysia and the Philippines that have less funding to turn the tide on terrorism. But we have so many international organizations, I didn't have a chance to talk about them, that fight piracy. So the International Maritime Organization, RECAP, and of course Interpol. What we really need is an oversight of all these international organizations so they can all collaborate, because they all seem to be working in little silos. And the idea of having a kind of UN maritime oversight organization that could turn the tide, I think is a really important idea, because it is apolitical, and this region is so political. To have a place where people could agree to disagree on how to deal with the criminals and the terrorists in this area could make the UN an interesting body, I think, to unify all these actors that are already there and are doing amazing work, but they're not sharing their expertise enough, and especially on illicit financing. These terrorist groups are extremely rich, and because they have so much money, they can buy young people who need money. And so I think it's really, really important to find a kind of an umbrella organization.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the question, actually, which allows me to also touch a few points I wanted to mention earlier, but no time. Actually, the interest that NATO takes in the Pacific is because of the connection that we have between the two regions. So we are a North Atlantic organization, so that's our theater. But we realize, because of the reason mentioned also by many speakers, that there are two regions are connected. Many mentioned the regions, the links due to the economy, for instance. But maybe I would stress a couple of points which actually are more what we look at. North Korea using and providing weapons, missiles being used on the front in Ukraine. North Korea sending between 12,000 and 10,000 military personnel helping Russia against the war in Ukraine. A no-limits friendship between Russia and China. So this is the angle. So we see things through our own threats, which are indeed Russia and terrorism, but in this case Russia. China for us is not a threat. China is a systemic challenger, which is challenging our interests and values because of coercive policies, because of the military build-up without transparency. So this is why, of course, we are concerned, and China is a challenge, a systemic challenge. We'll see if the denomination changes in the next summit declaration, but this is the current way we see in our concept. Therefore, the partnership we have with the Indo Pacific partners are because they see eye to eye with us on these elements. So they've been putting sanctions on Russia, they've been helping Ukraine, they're developing with us partnership to deal with cybersecurity, on hybrid threats. So this is really linked to the challenge we face more directly. We do not have a formal partnership with the Southeast Asian countries. We have partners across the globe, 40 more or less across the globe, but no one in Southeast Asia. We have contact countries, so this means sometimes we have some exchanges more on a ad hoc basis on different issues, but this is very different from the level of being a partner. Also, I would flag regarding the NATO expansion that by treaty, we cannot expand to Indo-Pacific. And I flag this because many times when I actually travel in the region, I hear, you are expanding, is Japan joining NATO? No. Is Australia joining NATO? No. This country cannot join NATO because our organization is a North Atlantic organization. So it's very important to mention, because you will see, and I can bet, at the next summit in a couple of weeks' time, China will come up again saying that NATO is expanding to the Indo-Pacific. But NATO is not expanding to the Indo-Pacific because simply is not possible. Thanks.
Great. And on that note, which was very, I think, unequivocal about what NATO is doing, and maybe, again, pre-bunking, I guess, what will be potentially, again, a kind of a slew of different headlines about various potential liaison offices and similar types of engagements. I also recalled when you were talking about the institutional cooperation, and IP4 was also mentioned there. It was quite a signal at the Washington summit last year that both the EU and IP4 actually were together with NAC, right, at that session. So it just tells us the kind of ambition behind those partnerships. I'm afraid our time is up, and I don't want to disappoint Lorenza, Benedetta, and the amazing team that has helped put everything together logistically and has been just a terrific resource for all of us who have in some capacity been involved either as chairs or as speakers. So I would just like to acknowledge them, the organizational side. They're not, on the podium, but they're definitely the ones without whom we couldn't be on the podium. So first, just thanks to them. And then I'll just ask you to remain seated because we have the honor to have not one but two sets of closing remarks. So as we exit the podium, we will hear first from the Minister Gun-hwa Kim, who is from the Embassy of Republic of Korea to Italy, and he will be followed by Mr. Andrea Romusi, who is the head of the Office for NATO Security and Political Military Strategic Issues at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And if I was better prepared, I probably would have said that in Italian, but you get now just the anglicized version. So thank you again for your attention, and please stay for the closing remarks, and we can all, I'm sure, chat bilaterally if there were further questions. Thank you again.
So now we go to, thank you very much, to the last part of our conference. And I was very pleased to see that, for instance, European Union, NATO cooperation is increasing. This is good news, and we saw it is happening, in fact. Now we are going to the last part of our conference, and the next speaker, as it was already said, will be Minister Gun-hwa Kim, I hope I pronounce it correctly, who is the Minister of the Republic of Korea to Rome. And he will be followed by Minister Andrea Romusi, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Italy. He is the responsible for NATO affairs, political military affairs, and strategic affairs. So you first, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. President Alessandro Mauro Riccio, Mr. Elena Grecci from European Commission, Union Commission, Mr. Andrea Romucci from Italian Foreign Ministry, and all the panelists and guests. I extend my sincere gratitude to all who have gathered here, and mostly I'm very, very appreciating for the organizer. I would like to begin my closing remarks with a quick quiz for all of you. On the June, does anybody know what happened exactly 200 years ago today? You can use ChatGPT. Okay. On June 18th, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo took place. This battle, which marked the end of Napoleonic Wars, subsequently led to the establishment of the Council of Europe through the Congress of Vienna, based on the principle of the balance of power. This system, in turn, contributed to what is known as a long peace until the outbreak of the First World War. In stark contrast, 100 years ago, today, the world was engulfed in the First World War, an unprecedented conflict in human history. Meanwhile, 70 years ago, on this very day, the Second World War was nearing its end, but demanding immense sacrifices. Following the Second World War, humanity began to experience unprecedented peace and prosperity. We, as a society, grew to take peace for granted. We even started to believe that war is an anachronic relic of the past. However, reflecting on what happened just 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and 70 years ago today, we are reminded anew of how precious the peace we enjoy on this very day of June 18, 2025 truly is. Particularly with the recent events like the war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East, we are keenly aware that peace is by no means a given. Peace is a precious outcome forged by the tireless efforts of humankind. Furthermore, today, we face various crises that cannot be resolved without international cooperation, making peace even more vital. Geopolitical conflict, the climate crisis, the demographic crisis, political and economic bipolarization, and technological changes like AI that brings about job displacement. These are all issues that humanity must confront and collaborate on together. Yet, regrettably, human society is currently characterized by fragmentation and confrontation. Even the system of liberal democracy, which has driven post-war peace and prosperity, is facing crisis both internally and externally. It is with this profound concern in mind that we gathered here yesterday and today to address the new type of security threat unfolding globally in various forms, collaboration and cooperation between NATO and its Indo Pacific partners, IP4, that include Korea, a demand of our times. Glückwünscht nicht als der Zustand der Schmerz durch Galt. I'm sorry, I'm not good at German. Happiness is nothing more than the absence of pain. As the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said, the true value is often realized when it is lost. The same applies to peace. However, when peace is lost, so much else is easily lost. Therefore, prevention is paramount. And for prevention, extensive communication, that is, a dialogue, is essential. The title of this seminar, Indo Pacific 2025, Prevention and Dialogue, precisely capture this crucial point. Over the past 2 days, through 3 panel discussions, I believe we have thoroughly explored practical cooperation measures for the future. I sincerely hope that these discussions will be materialized into effective policies for our era, which faces new security threats. Before closing my remarks, I have one simple question. if they allow. Name is very important. Name determines identity. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. If NATO needs to expand its capability, do you have any plan to change its name? We have some example, like OECD. OECD used to be Organization of European Economic Cooperation, and they changed the name. Then they invite more countries. Once again, I congratulate you on successful hosting of this seminar, and I extend my heartfelt thanks to all those who dedicate their efforts to organizing this meaningful event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me today for making the closing remarks. Thank you, Ambassador Rizzo and your formidable team organizing these 2 days of seminar. Thank you, Minister Gungwa Kim, for being here today, and all the colleagues that made it a long way from Brussels as well. So we are 1 week away from the next summit of NATO taking place in The Hague. It is the 4th time in a row that we invited the head of state and government of the partners of the Indo Pacific, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So it is a very much, partnership under consolidation already, but also under construction. We all know about the 4 flagship projects, but indeed there are also other additional topics for cooperation. They have been identified together with the partners for activities of importance to deepening the cooperation, including on 3 topics, to address the key choke points revealed in the context of support to Ukraine, the Science for Peace and Security program, and enhancing the ability to communicate securely. So efforts to address key choke points revealed in the context of support to Ukraine continues to be a key topic of importance, as discussed in the North Atlantic Council with the 4 partners last May, on 20 May 2025. In the context of NATO's defense critical supply chain security roadmap, the 4 partners were invited to a workshop organized jointly by the Conference of National Armament Directors and the NATO Science and Technology Board on the recycling and substitution of the 12 NATO defense critical raw material, which took place on 19 March 2025. Looking ahead, the Defense Investment Division is working towards establishing staff-to-staff dialogue with the 4 partners in a tailor-made approach, in line with the 2024 NATO Industry Capacity Expansion Pledge, the Defense Production Action Plan, and the 4 partners, as mentioned, individual tailored partnership program with NATO, as well as their long-standing cooperation with NATO. Recognizing the importance of using the same standards will be key to carry out these initiatives. As far as the Science for Peace and Security program, representative of the scientific and academic community of the 4 parties have been actively engaged in its deliberation, with a peak of application in 2024 and expect similar numbers in 2025. So the sectors are chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense, unexploded ordnance, countering improvised explosive device, and strategic foresights are shared top priorities. Innovation and EDTs, the emerging disruptive technologies, Related activity have the highest overall number of activities from Australia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. Cyber defense is also a leading priority area for research. Last point I mentioned was the communication, the secure communication issue. In January 2025, Japan's secure connection to NATO became operational, thus enhancing our ability to communicate securely and share information at the speed of relevance. The Republic of Korea continues to work bilaterally with the NATO Office of Security, including through taking the necessary steps to meet the technical security and policy requirements to enable the use of secure information and communication technologies. This is to say that the partnership is dynamic, is not just carried out through the 4 flagship projects, but also through new activities. So in the challenging global security environment, NATO's cooperation with our Indo Pacific partners is helping allies address security challenges more effectively and helping our partners in the region to do the same. We are more secure when we work together. NATO and our 4 Indo-Pacific partners have a proven track record of tackling a range of security challenges. We are improving our ability to deal with cyber attacks, sharing best practices on artificial intelligence, and deepening our cooperation on defense technology and innovation. As we are all increasing our defense spending and beefing up our military capabilities, we are increasing also our cooperation on defense industrial issues, including through a more focused dialogue on specific multinational projects on military capabilities. So Indo-Pacific partners are also providing important support for Ukraine, including by providing non-lethal equipment through NATO's Comprehensive Assistance Package, the CAP, Trust Fund for Ukraine. Australia and New Zealand are also operational partners to the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine, NSATU, while Japan also indicated its willingness to participate. So security in Europe impacts the Indo-Pacific and vice versa. Security today is no longer regional, it is global. In Europe, Russia continues to wage an unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. It is ramping up its defense spending, its economy is on a war footing, and the Kremlin has not given up its ambition to reshape European security. Meanwhile, North Korea and Russia are increasing their cooperation. North Korean troops and weapons are being used against Ukraine. What Pyongyang receives and will receive in return from Russia could have serious consequences for the Indo-Pacific region and the global security more broadly. So to finish, just a few remarks also with the elephant in the room, the role of China vis-à-vis NATO. To be clear that People's Republic of China remains a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine. So the relationship between Moscow and Beijing is getting stronger, and China's large-scale support for Russia's defense industrial base increases the threat Russia poses to its neighbors and to the Euro-Atlantic security more broadly. The PRC's challenges to our security, our interest, and our values go beyond its support for Russia. Beijing is pursuing a major military build-up, including the expansion of its nuclear arsenal, without transparency. We have seen hostile hybrid activities, including information manipulation, political interference, and particularly cyber operation against allies emanating from China. China also seeks to control key technologies, critical infrastructures, and supply chains. Countries with deep ties to Russia and North Korea, especially China, must use their influence to uphold international law. By opposing Moscow and Pyongyang's dangerous expansion of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. At the same time, we want to keep maintaining a proactive approach, a constructive approach vis-à-vis China to engage and to seek a constructive dialogue on military transparency and call on Beijing to cooperate constructively on arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your very concrete and interesting remarks. We are arriving at the end of the day, of the 2 days, in fact, and I think it has been a very interesting conversation we had with so many speakers when looking at things at so many angles, which is always the most important thing to my mind. So I thank you for your presence. I thank the speakers, the moderators, everybody, and also I would like to give a special thanks to the staff of the foundation. So please join me in a round of applause for their hard work and enthusiasm. Bene, grazie, arrivederci a tutti.